All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of On the DELO, episode 102. And this is a cool one because I'm going to talk with somebody about something that I don't know shit about, and then some stuff. But welcome, Stephen. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, DELO.
Awesome. How did we meet again?
We met through our mutual friend, the man, the myth, Adam Leor, founder of Sinatra, and have just kind of become buddies through the Phoenix scene.
Yeah, and so how did you get involved with Sinatra? When did that all come?
Funny string of connectivity there. So Adam and I became friends. I think the first time he and I met in person was when he came out to an event that I threw in Phoenix. I've been hosting Bitcoin meetups here for a few years.
Okay.
So it's just kind of casual, usually once every 2 to 4 weeks, people get together at a bar, brewery, something like that, and talk about Bitcoin. And it ends up being a good mixture of folks. Adam came out to one of those, and he and I hit it off, and then
That's cool.
Got to talking more about tech and what he's up to.
Yeah, and am I correct in saying that you have a little bit to do with Sinatra?
I am an investor in Sinatra. Yeah. So, very small in terms of sort of contributions. Others are doing all the heavy lifting, but very excited.
Yeah, well, and that's part of that's part of what I want to talk to you about today. That's not the stuff that I don't know crap about. The Bitcoin, which we'll get into, which I'm excited to talk about and give people kind of an entrepreneurial perspective and a no BS sort of talking point about it and what it really is and what it really isn't. But you're an angel investor, right?
That's right.
And how many concepts are you in right now?
Have done about 55 angel investments, and that spanned the last 6 years or so.
Right.
So it was pretty slow and gradual ramping up. Like I started doing that stuff in 2017, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't have a background in finance. I felt like I knew a lot about startups that I had learned from working at them, doing software things and kind of being on the employee side. So I wanted to try to apply some of those learnings from the investor side of the table. But I don't have a finance degree. I don't have an MBA. There's a lot about business that I just sort of learned empirically along the way. And so I was dipping my toe in the waters in 2017, just with the goal of grow at it, learn more about it every day, and knew that I wanted to do more of it and see if I could make that the focus. And now it's kind of got to the point where the last 2 years, that really has been the full-time focus effectively.
So for people that are listening that don't even know what an angel investor is, what is like a very layman's term? Like what's the definition of an angel investor?
Yeah, angel investor is essentially investing into private companies, often technology companies and startups, and typically it's the earliest stages of the company. So it could even be one person with nothing more than an idea, and they need some capital to go and try to bring that to life. And the distinction between angel investing and something like venture capital is angel investing typically involves the investor's own personal capital. Mm-hmm. And whereas VCs and kind of institutional investors, they are investing into the same type of companies, but they are often investing money that others have given them. So they're like managing other people's money, putting that into the company.
Makes sense. And would you say about 99% of the companies out there that get invested in fail?
Yeah, the failure rate's pretty high, just in terms of stats and raw numbers. The earliest stages as well are when the number of unknowns is just the highest. Yeah. And so, it's high risk, high reward. You can wait and you can invest later when the company has grown, it's kind of got a product out there, maybe it's got a lot of traction and they're even making a ton of money. And that could still be a profitable investment, but because so much of that has been proven, a lot of that risk has been removed. And so when you invest at that point, you typically are paying a much higher price.
Yeah, so you're really investing in an idea, a person, maybe a prayer.
Often, yes, combination of all the above.
Yeah, and I guess that's just kind of the way the world works. I just read a book, and the title, I can't remember the title, but it's a VC book, and it talks about Sequoia and Andreessen, like all these different firms that I'm starting to get familiar with now with my relationship with Sinatra and what's going on there. And it's really interesting to hear the perspectives on how all these, now big companies got started, and literally in, pajamas and, alcohol strewn apartment buildings and, again, just an idea, prayer, and a person.
Totally. Was it The Power Law by any chance?
Yes,
Is that
it
the
was.
book?
Thank
yeah.
you. Yes.
Excellent book. I learned a lot from that book as well
Yeah.
because, I feel like I sort of came onto the scene, but often you're missing the historical context for why things are the way they are in an industry. And that book did such a great job of kind of painting the picture of like, here's how it started. And then, there wasn't a lot of the structure that there is today. And here's like how and why that all came to be. And it really provides great context.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the more successful you become, the more like barriers and the more things that you got to worry about as far as stock options and taxes and and it's like these companies, these people, like you almost have to spend a shit ton of money in order to just keep yourself whole.
I believe Notorious B.I.G. summarized that pretty well. Mo money, mo problems. The surface area for stuff that you worry about often does tend to increase the more you're exposed to.
Interesting. Yeah. No, it's so true. Okay, so 2017, you start to become an angel. You grow your wings. You invest in, you get like 55 companies that you've invested in now. What were you doing prior to that? You mentioned software and this and that. So what was it that you were doing? What was your 9-to-5 beginnings and what was your job and all that?
Yeah, pretty software centric. So grew up, I was always just really pulled toward internet tech and computers, just fascinated with it. So I am from a small town in Missouri originally and studied computer science in college. The sort of official curriculums that I had access to in high school and college weren't very tech focused.
Right.
And so a lot of what I learned ended up being independent study. I would go to the library in my small hometown after school and just crack open these big books about how computers work and how the internet works. And I would take notes on them. And
Wow.
I still have these like pieces of aligned notebook paper at home.
Yeah.
Because I was just so pulled toward it. I almost couldn't resist. And so I knew for a long time I wanted to be involved in that scene and just wasn't sure in what capacity. But after college, applied for every job I could find in Silicon Valley because I thought that that's where all this hot internet stuff was happening, and got hired at eBay as an engineer. And so I was there for about 4 years, kind of working on software and infrastructure that powers eBay.com. And that was where I learned a lot about how big corporations work and how big websites work. So that was kind of my first sort of business boot camp and full-time gig. And eventually moved into leading people and leading teams. So I'm, wasn't and am not the most brilliant engineer in the room by any means, but I feel like the sweet spot for me is kind of that intersection of people and tech. So like bringing together a group of people, trying to get them excited about, what we're marching toward and build something.
Yeah.
I love that challenge.
Your personality fits that of almost like an ambassador between an engineer and like getting other people that don't know anything about any of what you just talked about together. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like a bridge.
Yeah, I think so. I love that challenge of trying to take something that is maybe very techy, maybe there's a lot of like lingo to it that people aren't familiar with, and just trying to like simplify it, and humanize it, and frame it in a way that's accessible and meaningful to people from whatever context they're coming from.
Yeah.
So I worked at eBay for a few years and then had a couple journeys as an early stage startup employee. So I was never a founder myself, never had my own startup, but there were a couple times that I joined startups when they were fairly early on, like fewer than 10 employees each, and kind of experienced that ride from, like, holy shit, things are going well and things are not going well, and then felt like there was a lot that I was surprised by in both those journeys, and at the end of it looked back and thought, man, there's like probably not many people in the world who have had the opportunity to like learn those lessons in those hard ways that I just learned, and that made me excited about trying to go and do the investor thing a little bit more and get access to that asset class of startups.
Yeah, so that's all very successful time that you've spent because you've learned and you understand. And now when you probably look at a company to, invest in, you can take the perspective of what they're going through and really understand that and go along for the ride with them from, 30,000 feet, but
I think so. I think I'm really grateful that I did have that direct in the trenches experience
Yeah.
at startups, because I think it does just make it more relatable. You can empathize a lot more with founders and employees of these companies when they're so early on,
Yeah.
in a way that I don't feel like I would have been able to otherwise.
That's cool. All right, so you had a checking account back then?
I did.
I assume they paid you money, cash. When did you get rid
They
of your
did.
checking account? When did all this Bitcoin shit happen?
Oh man, yeah, Bitcoin. So, favorite topic to jam on, and I assume we've got about 4 hours here that we'll
We'll
into.
edit it down to 15 minutes. So go.
Perfect. I got exposed to Bitcoin in 2011 to 2013.
Okay.
And so, about 10 years ago by now. And during that 2-year period, I mostly ignored it. I felt like I'm super busy. I'm trying to help do this startup stuff, and it was a grind. And so I felt like I didn't have the mental bandwidth to pay attention to this Bitcoin stuff.
Yeah.
So there were smart friends of mine who just kept nudging me, and I was shrugging it off. 2013, I finally said, okay, they're still excited about it. I do think they're some of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And this thing is still around. It hasn't died yet, even though I read headlines that said this thing is dying. And so that made me really curious and wanted to dive in more. And, I think that's when I bought a tiny amount and started to get more curious.
Yeah.
And then really over the 2-year period following that, I kind of went from intellectual curiosity to and optimism to, damn, this is unlike anything that I've ever seen before in ways that were not obvious to me. And I think it could actually be this huge deal and transformative for the world.
So when you're looking at all this, is there any of your personal money into it yet? Or are you just kind of looking from afar, watching and reading and understanding and learning? And if that's the case, when did you say, you know what, I'm just going to throw whatever 10 grand into this and see what happens?
Yeah, I started buying a little bit in 2013.
Okay.
The price around then was, I think it actually worked out well in terms of price, because there was this big run up to $1,000 at the time, which seems hilarious given today's prices of 44,000 or so.
Yeah.
But back then it ran up from I think $100 to $1,000.
Okay.
And I came in right after that. So I think when it was 800, that was the first tiny bit that I threw a few $100 into this.
Yeah.
And then immediately after that, it crashed back down to 200. And so it was this very quick forcing function almost for me to go, did I just get scammed? Is this thing actually nonsense? And now I'm down on this investment. And so that kind of forced me to, challenge my thinking around it a little bit, go and want to learn more and figure out okay, do I part ways with this, or is there something here and should I actually buy more of it? And the more that I dove in, the more that I read and learned, my confidence just grew.
Okay.
And so I gradually in the coming years just kept buying more and more Bitcoin, and went through this journey of other cryptocurrencies too. All the listeners probably know there's thousands of these things, Ethereum, Cardano, Solana, blah, blah, blah. So there was one point in time where I probably owned 20 different cryptocurrencies. And I thought, this is all the future, and it's going to be
one's going to take off.
Yeah. One is going to dominate, but maybe it's even this future where there's a coin for everything. And so if you think DELO is cool, you'll buy DELO coin. And if you think Kanye West is cool, you'll buy Kanye coin or whatever it is. And that'll be the way that we express value. And that was all interesting kind of thought experiments, but I've changed my view on that a lot. I've kind of come back to this position of I see a lot of substance and promise in Bitcoin itself, and not as much in any of the others. And so today I only hold Bitcoin.
All your eggs are in the Bitcoin basket.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I can see, I'm sure most people listening that follow this, because this isn't really a tech podcast or a financial podcast, but it is becoming one, because I want you all to learn. And that's why I want to just keep it as simple as possible, because I think that there's definitely opportunities for people, and I think people certainly give up too soon. And I think if you're going to, in my opinion, if you're going to invest in something that you're not educated in or very unsure about, but you're just kind of interested in putting money somewhere else, don't make it be all of your money.
Totally.
Just do little bits and chunks, of Bitcoin.
Wise words.
Right.
I encourage the same. I think even though I believe in it on a long-term time frame, the short-term game is so unpredictable and can be so gnarly. And so I tell people, when you're going to buy your first amount of it, put in something that will not bother you if it drops by half the following day.
Yeah.
And the strategy that I honestly think is best and simplest is dollar cost averaging, which basically just means pick whatever dollar amount works for your budget. Maybe that's $100 a month, $10 a month, $1,000 a month, but whatever that number is, just do that. Like put it on cruise control. Automatically buy that every week, every month on a regular basis, and then you're kind of dampening all of that
Cost
noise and that volatility,
stuff,
so you don't have to stress about the short-term action.
Well, it's kind of like, I mean, I have a Vanguard account, retirement account, and I have money pulled out. I'm sure a lot of people do. They just get their money pulled out and put in retirement. I'm sure that makes you irk, but it'd be no different, I guess, because from what you were saying is like Bitcoin's not going anywhere. If anything, it's going to get stronger over time.
Yeah, that's what I believe, and Bitcoin is about 15 years old now, and so it's not as young as it used to be.
Yeah.
And although it has had these wild fluctuations and crashes over the years, it's come back stronger. It has a track record of doing that, and it's hilarious to go back and read some of the headlines from these crashes and look at what the price tag was at those levels. Like there were headlines from Forbes and the Wall Street Journal saying like RIP Bitcoin, it's time to move on. Bitcoin experiment has failed, and that's when it was like $15, $100, $5,000. Like it's perceived to be dying over and over and over, and somehow it's just not.
There's a lot of noise out there for sure, and if you listen to it, you can certainly get distracted. So is there a safe way to buy Bitcoin? Yeah,
I would recommend finding people who you trust in the ecosystem and using recommendations from them, because it is still sort of the Wild West. Like if you just go out there with a search engine and you type, Bitcoin, some of those results might be sketchy. There might still be companies that are claiming to sell you Bitcoin, and they will happily take your money and not give you Bitcoin in return.
So what about like popular places like Coinbase and Trust Wallet and stuff like that? Are those reliable?
Those are reliable in terms of they're on the up and up. They're going to be giving you exposure to Bitcoin. What I don't love about them and sort of Coinbase specifically is they seem very focused on a lot of the other cryptocurrencies, and so that onboarding process, like when you join Coinbase, you register and say you buy a little bit of Bitcoin through them. What's going to happen the next time you log in is they're going to show you a pop-up and say, congrats, you've got Bitcoin. There are all these hundreds of other great coins that we have, and you should totally trade your Bitcoin for this hot coin of the week and all of that. And so it's a lot of noise. And I feel like the marketing there I don't love. Like I feel like it sort of leads people astray if you do believe that the future will be more Bitcoin centric.
Right.
And if you just look at the history of a lot of these other cryptocurrencies, the risk profile is so much higher.
Yeah.
So I try to refer friends, family, anyone to companies that just focus on Bitcoin and don't support the other coins.
Yeah.
A couple examples, Swan Bitcoin. So I'm an investor in them, full disclosure. But Swan.com, they make it easy to dollar cost average. And they have advisory teams. They can facilitate retirement accounts even if you want exposure through a retirement account.
Okay.
And then another company that I have no affiliation with is River Financial, and they're also fantastic, very Bitcoin focused. So I think both of like those types of companies that are just trying to build a secure, stable, beautiful user experience around Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's the sweet spot in my opinion.
It's interesting. There's so many things. There's gold. There's silver.
Oh yeah.
Bitcoin. There's all this stuff, and everybody obviously they'll they'll preach what it is that they believe in. I think what would be really curious and good for the audience to understand is, okay, here's your worst case scenario. You lose all your money. Like, cool. Lose all your money, Bitcoin goes away. But obviously, like you said, 15 years, been around. It's it's gone lower than what it is now. It's creeping up. Now it's had to prepare for this. I've been kind of following the market a little bit. It's been going up a little bit. So that's number one. Number two. let's go all the way to the extreme of, let's just say, Joe invests today, 20 years later, Joe has this much more money. What's the benefit of having this much more money in Bitcoin that Joe can utilize before he croaks?
I think that the risk reward profile of Bitcoin is really unique among any other asset class out there that you can evaluate. And one area of sort of history and economics that I think is fascinating is just we as humans for thousands of years, like how have we protected our wealth? Back to sort of the like tribal cave person days all the way until now. It's like seashells were money, gold trinkets were money, and then there's all these other sort of asset classes like real estate, goats,
chickens,
livestock, real estate, housing, and each sort of culture, geography, region, state of technology, all those factors, play a role in how people end up choosing to do that. And this is the kind of stuff that Bitcoin got me fascinated with, frankly. Like I put the software books on the shelf and I started reading more about the history of money, the history of economics,
Smart.
and why people choose different savings technologies. And I think that term is really important when thinking about Bitcoin, because when we think about money, especially in the United States, I think we naturally jump to the conclusion of payments.
Yeah.
Like I know that was true for me in my journey. I thought like first time I heard about Bitcoin, I was like, oh, neat. So it's this new internet money. So where can I spend it? Like, can I go to a coffee
that's what
shop?
most people think.
Right. And that's natural. Like totally understand why that's the case. But the deeper that I went into Bitcoin, the more I sort of realized like payments is part of money, but it's only one part. And this other part that might even be bigger and more important that we overlook and we take for granted, especially here in the US, is a savings technology, a way to protect the value that you've already earned. And when you start to look at Bitcoin through that lens, I think its potential is unmatched. One reason that is true is there is a limited number of Bitcoin that will ever exist.
Right.
And that magic number is 21 million.
They don't keep printing it like they do money, like the banks do.
Exactly. And I thought that statement was, I was hyper skeptical the first time I heard that. I was like, limited number of something digital on computers? Like, that's not how computers work.
Right.
It's easy. Like, software is just code. Why can't you
R2D2
change?
just goes in there and changes to 41. Yeah.
Exactly. So I came at it with all kinds of, I'm going to poke holes in this. I'm going to like see what they're missing or, why they're marketing it this way when it clearly can't work that way.
Yeah.
And the more that I learned about Bitcoin, the more impressed I became with this really clever set of incentives in the system that provide guarantees about that predictability.
Okay.
And that could be, we could spend hours just on that topic alone, but the summary of it is, I think it's actually true that there will never, ever be more than 21 million Bitcoin that can ever exist.
Yeah.
No matter how badly anyone wants to change it, no matter how badly Google, Facebook, Amazon, U.S. governments, militaries around the world, geopolitical actors, I don't believe that number can ever change. And that type of scarcity and predictability, you can't get anywhere else. So, people have loved gold for a long time because they think governments are printing more money. They can't easily print more gold. So, I'm going to hold this stuff. And I actually was, aboard that for a while. I had gold and, silver coins and all that. And philosophically, I'm absolutely down with that. But I think Bitcoin has all of those same strengths, just more, like 100x better, because we don't know how much silver and gold is left under the Earth's crust.
Right.
We certainly don't know how much is in the solar system. Once Elon gets better at this asteroid mining stuff, maybe he's going to go and find trillions of dollars worth of gold.
And then it becomes worthless.
So you have, supply and demand is what creates a price, and the supply is just so hard to know with any other asset, and especially dollars, right? It's obvious that they can whim dollars into existence whenever they want. But what's special about Bitcoin is that it's the first time we've had a limited number of something digital, and so we know exactly how many Bitcoin there are right now and how many there will ever be.
Interesting.
50 years from now, 1,000 years from now,
So are they all taken up for? Like when somebody goes to buy a Bitcoin, where are they buying it from? Somebody else that may have sold? It's just
Yes.
kind of a transactional thing that happens all the time. So people sell and rebuy and sell and.
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah.
Similar to almost like foreign exchange markets. You can almost think of it as another form of currency, but one with a supply that is
Yeah.
strictly limited. Or even a commodity is probably a better way to think about
Okay.
it, like a gold, silver, like precious metals, or oil, for example, or
Yeah.
copper. So there are companies out there that are mining Bitcoin, which
Right.
is the process by which they're found. So like ultimately, that's where all of the Bitcoin come from. But when you are just going and purchasing Bitcoin, it's not necessarily that you're like buying these Bitcoin that are fresh out of the mines. It's usually you're buying from some other entity that is just holding and kind of selling Bitcoin, and maybe
Okay.
they're moving back and forth into the asset all the time.
Okay. So then last question I have about this, just for the middle ground thing, and this is totally hypothetical, but for people to kind of have a very clear understanding, it's to my understanding that like Visa and MasterCard have actual credit cards that will allow you to put Bitcoin value on there for a human being like yourself that has no cash to be able to use to actually purchase stuff. Is that right? Or, like, how do you, if I have no cash and I've got all my life savings, 500 grand in Bitcoin, and I need to go buy a house or I need to go buy a car, or I need to go buy groceries, how do I do that?
Yeah, there are companies out there that are kind of building products and solutions around that. Credit cards that are backed by Bitcoin, debit cards that are backed by Bitcoin, Bitcoin banking accounts effectively that allow you to do ACH transfers, wire transfers, but really sort of Bitcoin is like the base money underneath that. I'm not sure about Visa and MasterCard specifically, kind of, where their head is at on this stuff. They're certainly dabbling in it in different ways. But I think that the payment stuff is interesting because as much of a Bitcoiner as I consider myself, and as much as I believe that, someday Bitcoin is going to be used for all payments everywhere, I think it's still really early for that. And I think that as hilariously simple as it sounds, the killer way to use Bitcoin today is simply to buy it and to hold it. And there's this funny principle in economics of kind of how different forms of money compete with each other. And so if one form of money is stronger than another, like maybe Bitcoin is competing with the US dollar and with the Japanese yen and with the Mexican peso and all of these currencies. And you can observe throughout history where different forms of money have competed. And what kind of happens is you'll get people who, have access to both. And the way that they behave is they want to hold the stronger money and they want to spend the weaker money. And I think that's an interesting way to conceptualize it today, is like almost like spend dollars for as long as the world will let you get away with it.
Right.
Because if you have the choice of parting with your precious, scarce Bitcoin that people have no idea how limited it is, no idea how valuable it could become, or parting with some weaker form of money, maybe that's dollars that don't have those same supply guarantees, then, spend the dollars. Credit cards work decently well for payments today. If you try to pay at the register with Bitcoin, it's probably going to be this clunky experience because it's just so early in its journey.
Yeah, so it's really an investment mechanism at this point.
Yeah, I kind of see it in this phased progression where there's three parts to it. There is first a savings technology, and then there is a payments technology, and only at the end of it is there kind of this unit of account function, which is basically like thinking about prices, listing prices. So if you are Press Coffee, for example, then someday I think it will make sense to list your prices on the menu in Bitcoin, which is that third phase, that like unit of account where you conceptualize the price. But that would be a nightmare today. They should not do that today. You should never attempt to like list prices in Bitcoin right now because we are so early in this that we're still in the store of value phase. So as more people learn what Bitcoin is, more people are going to buy it, and that's just going to continue to make it volatile. So we have to wait until trillions of dollars figure this out and buy it before it really calms down.
People end up having it on their phone, and they'll be able to go into a Press Coffee and just scan. Here's the Bitcoin, done, and then it just takes it out and does whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's really cool. All right. Well, that's awesome. That's a great overview. I don't want to get too in detail and make everybody's head explode, but I do want to talk about you as an individual. You're obviously an entrepreneur. You're obviously doing investing in a lot of great stuff. So because this is more of like an entrepreneur, podcast, I like people to get a feel for the individual that I'm interviewing and just kind of like what your day looks like and what are things that you do on a daily basis that make you feel better, make you want to, have drive, just all those things.
Yeah, love it. My day nowadays looks wildly different from, when I was kind of full-time employee at startups or corporations. And it took me a while to adjust to that, actually, having that lack of structure around the day. It has been an adjustment for me. I think nowadays it can vary wildly because I'm, somewhat involved in a lot of different companies.
Yeah.
But the capacity in which I'm involved is sort of unofficial.
Right.
So you're looking for ways that you can be helpful to companies, and that could be, helping them with hiring, helping them with fundraising and venture capital strategy, even chiming in on product strategy or some of the tech and software pieces.
Yeah.
I enjoy all of that, but it's really hard to predict like when that's going to be needed or useful at any of these companies. And so I would say it's very bursty in terms of the demand for that. So there will be weeks where I feel overloaded and it's just like back-to-back meetings with entrepreneurs who I'm already involved with and maybe some sort of pitch sessions or, just getting to know other founders.
Yeah.
And so there will be like meeting heavy weeks where I kind of walk away from that feeling a little bit overwhelmed and exhausted.
Right.
And then I need a recharge and I'll try to block a few days off for deep work and have more that I'm kind of wanting to launch in terms of my own content. So, have a book in the works.
Oh, cool.
Which is new territory for me.
Okay.
And I am fairly ADHD in terms of my contributions to things.
That.
And so the idea of like sit down for this multi-hour period and just do this one thing is challenging, but I think it's like healthy growth type of challenging.
1,000%.
Yeah. So I've been trying to be more disciplined about carving out certainly time in the mornings for health and things that I was never as good about prioritizing before. So wake up, don't check my phone for the first hour. It's, family time. We have a 1-year-old at home, my wife and I here in Phoenix. And so trying to be there for the morning routine, be there in the evening and really be present is something that was such a struggle for so much of my adult life. And I think that having a child has really helped anchor me in that regard and make me more present, which I appreciate. So paying a lot more attention nowadays to nutrition and exercise, try to start the day off like that. And when I do, I feel so much better. Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing what good nutrition, sleep, movement, and most importantly, family and community time,
For sure.
If you read about the blue zones, that's what they talk about all the time, and it's funny because it's not like people in those areas are doing one thing, they're doing all the things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that really is a balancing act. And I think that I've become a lot more comfortable realizing that there is no perfect 24-hour template for me. I used to want to strive for that. I used to want to be like, okay, this is the cookie cutter template, and this is how I'm going to structure every single day. Yeah. And that's going to be optimal for me. And I've come to the conclusion that does not exist. That's a fantasy. And really, the most it makes sense to the most granular it makes sense for me to get is kind of a week by week time frame. Yeah. And so, maybe one day looks like very work intense in some capacity, and then the next day you kind of balance that out. And then I think on that week over week time frame, it's much more achievable, and I don't stress as much about what any particular 24-hour period looks like.
Totally makes sense. Like yesterday, my day was, hell, and not because it was a bad day. It was just like here to there to, I taught class at GCU, and I taught for 4 hours, liquor liability, which is great, and it's passionate, and these kids love it, But you gotta. I wake up, I work out, I go over there, I have a meeting before that, I go teach that, then I have another meeting, then I gotta go home and pick up my guitar, which is awesome because I get to go to guitar lessons for 30 minutes. But then I have another meeting, and then I have a happy hour that I don't even drink, but I go to the happy hour to be social. Then by the time I get home for dinner, which is late for me, is like 6:30, and I'm like out of my. So I was like, okay, I got to make sure that Friday is just kind of more of a mellow day, just in the office, do the podcast like what we're doing today, and so I totally resonate with that.
Oh man, yeah, it's also easy for me, I think, to get borderline neurotic about certain routines.
Yeah.
And a big learning for me, especially this year, has been, with knowing so much about nutrition. Not saying that I'm an expert, but like to whatever extent you feel like you know about nutrition.
Yeah.
I think I'm guilty of, being just hyper aware of what I'm eating and what supplements I'm taking, and that can be good. I do it's important, but it can get to a ridiculous extent to where it's like I only took 11 out of the 12 supplements that I optimally take in the morning, and so I'm not going to be as clear-headed on Delo's podcast, and I'm not going to know the answers to what he asks me, and that just like gets to this place where the stress that you put on yourself undoes any benefit that you're getting, almost like ends up being a net negative, And Warren Buffett is over there like eating Dairy Queen and drinking Coca-Cola, and he's going to live to be 1,000 because he just like doesn't stress.
Richard, everybody combined listening. I know, it's crazy. No, that's great. That's great insight, and hopefully people can get a takeaway from that. All right, I have some rapid fire questions for you. You ready?
Hit me.
Okay, travel or stay home?
Travel.
What's your favorite place, destination?
Man, favorite. I liked Thailand a lot.
Okay.
I backpacked around the world solo for 6 months about 8 years ago when I was I felt burned out on tech startups, and spent a month in Thailand. I lived in a kickboxing gym there for 2 weeks. I hung out on a small island that you could basically jog around in a day, and loved it. And it was like just affordable and like wonderful people who were super kind and welcoming.
Yeah.
And really loved the culture and everything.
Too many bugs for me. Okay, a quick liquid breakfast, or do you like to eat a full hearty breakfast?
I prefer a full hearty breakfast, but you've got to have something, and so I kind of have a go-to liquid breakfast. So you have that baseline, but then try to strive for the hearty breakfast.
Family Feud or Wheel of Fortune?
Wheel of Fortune. Yeah. I was never exposed to Family Feud as much, I guess. Wheel of Fortune just happened to be much more on my radar growing up.
I think it's still on. I think it's
still going.
Pat Sage. Yeah.
Oh man.
Is that who it is? I don't know. Led Zeppelin or The Who?
You're going to just scold me for not really even knowing either of them. I mean, I know of their names,
okay.
But if you told me to name one song by either of them, I don't think that I could.
Okay. Why don't you give me your favorite band?
I like hip hop a lot, and rap.
You hear that, Jeremy Scott? We got another hip hop fan. So all right, so I'll give you this: Run DMC or Tupac?
Tupac.
All right.
Yep.
There you go.
There it is.
Tupac fans. Mac or PC?
Mac.
Halloween or 4th of July?
Ooh, 4th of July. Independence.
Very cool.
That theme resonates with me.
Yeah, and it's sunny and it's nice out.
Yeah.
Barbecue or sushi?
Oh man, those are like my two favorite categories, so really tough to pick. I'm gonna go with sushi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Wells Fargo or Bank of America? I couldn't resist.
Yeah, you gotta, like the dinosaur on the left or the dinosaur on the right?
You can say neither, it's fine.
Yeah,
I just did that to mess with you.
Which one of them will embrace the new money first is an interesting question.
Yeah. Hybrid or diesel?
Hybrid. These are so good. All over the place.
And last but not least, Twix or Jolly Ranchers?
Ooh, Twix.
Okay.
Love
yeah.
them. Big fan.
Yeah, Twix are for kids. They're good.
Yeah, and always stay a kid at heart.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what would you like people to know or learn about or follow? Or we'll put it all in show notes and this and that. And if they want to invest in Bitcoin, obviously you've already been forthcoming with you have part of a company. So just give us whatever information you want to share.
Yeah, I try to stay fairly active on Twitter. Most of the topics I spend time talking about on there are in the realm of startups or Bitcoin. My Twitter account is sthenc, so STHENC. And if there are any, founders, technologists, startup folks, just hit me up. My DMs are open. I love talking about this stuff.
Cool.
So whether it's how do I buy Bitcoin? I'm curious about what you said on this podcast, or if you're an entrepreneur kind of doing the startup thing, I love meeting cool people, doing cool stuff, and talking about cool things. So hit me up.
That's awesome, and you are cool people for sure. So, well, dude, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
This
It means
was
a
fun.
lot. I appreciate it.
And I turned the arrow down, and I'm freezing my ass off right now.
Glad we got the hoodies.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so I got my tech hoodie on. I wore it just, specifically for these tech podcasts we're doing.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, give it a 5-star, share it with your friends. Again, I just do this for, to entertain myself, get to know people better, but also to share some great information, hopefully, that you guys find for you. And just hit me up if you have any questions. And also, you can check out my website at I AM THE DELO. And until then, we will check you out later. Peace out.